Dead Island 2 has finally graced us with its presence after a nearly 10-year-long journey involving multiple development studios. Is the adrenaline-fueled, action-packed, axe-swinging, skull-crushing gorefest worth the wait? Let's find out.
This motherfucker!
This motherfucker!
The majority of your time spent playing Dead Island 2 is going to involve slicing, dicing, smashing and bashing the recently undeceased back to death with all sorts of melee weapons, firearms and gadgets. Luckily, the combat is an absolute blast. Your attacks feel like they really pack a punch, and the developers have clearly put a lot of time and effort into making sure the combat is engaging and dynamic, both from a gameplay perspective and a visual one. Weapons come in a small variety of different categories, such as two-handed slashing, one-handed blunt, firearms and polearms to name just a few, with each one having different attacks or playstyles. For example, slashing weapons are good at removing limbs, but blunt weapons are able to knock jaws off and cave skulls in, which might seem like a really minor thing, but when you're playing for long periods of time, it's nice to see some visual variation, as it does a fantastic job of preventing the game from becoming stale. Weapon drops are plentiful, with low quality items dropping from common enemies and higher quality loot boxes often being locked behind some sort of environmental puzzle, or a door that requires a fuse, which is an item bought from traders, to open. The high drop rates ensure that you always have a steady flow of exciting new toys to play with. Weapons are able to be modified at workbenches, allowing you to change the weapon's damage output and even apply different types of status effects and perks, such as making the weapon inflict electrical damage or increasing the damage you deal to zombies' limbs. These status effects and perks can be found throughout the game world, so always be on the lookout for new recipes. Dead Island 2 also includes a neat mechanic that allows you to level up your weapons to match your current character level, so if you become attached to a specific weapon, there's no fear of it becoming underpowered as you progress through the game. Speaking of progression, Dead Island 2 utilises a perk deck system that allows you to augment your character's offensive capabilities by equipping perk cards. These are acquired via leveling up, completing story quests, and defeating mini-bosses. The perk cards can be interchanged whenever you wish, allowing for a lot of freedom in how you decide to build your character. Each playable character has different stats, which I assume means that certain characters are supposed to excel in certain roles compared to others, but after some experimentation, it seems that perk selection is the key factor in how you end up playing the game. So my advice would be to just choose whichever character you like the look of, and not worry too much about their stats. Now that we've covered most of the gameplay elements, it's time to talk about Dead Island 2's story. To put it very bluntly, the plot is not good. It's dull, uninspired, and sometimes completely nonsensical. Without spoiling too much, the story begins with your character's evacuation flight out of LA being shot down due to a zombie outbreak on board, and you quickly discover that your character is immune to the zombie plague. You then discover that there's a doctor stationed in a hotel in the middle of LA, and he believes that your character's blood could be used to synthesize a cure. Cue your character jumping through all sorts of hoops in order to reach him. That's the plot boiled down to its absolute simplest form. The rest of this story review contains spoilers, so if you do intend to play through Dead Island 2 and want the plot to remain a mystery, skip to the time shown on screen. Roughly 7.5 hours into the game, a mysterious character is introduced who is set up to be the main antagonist. Her initial interaction with you implies that she knows a lot about the zombie outbreak, and she has some sort of connection to the zombies. She ends up throwing you into a pit of the undead, and simply walks away. Remember a moment ago when I mentioned she was set up to be the main antagonist? Well, apparently the writers of the game forgot this, and she only shows up a further 3 times in the game, one of which is during the end credits. It turns out that the real antagonist is actually the doctor that you've been trying to reach the whole time, and even this is shoehorned in during the final 3 hours of the game, and his motivations for turning into a bad guy are shaky at best. He reveals that he caused the outbreak in LA in order to find Newman, a human that, instead of turning into a zombie once infected, actually merges with the autophage to create a superhuman, which is apparently a 1 in a million chance. It turns out that the zombie plague isn't actually an illness either. It's hardwired into human DNA, effectively acting as a built-in auto-destruct sequence for the entire human race. The doctor also reveals that he genetically engineered his daughter to be a cure for the autophage, but this just ends up raising the question of why he had to infect the entirety of LA to find a cure if his daughter was a cure the entire time? See what I mean when I said the plot was nonsensical? Anyway, after the Doctor's exposition dump, he mutates into the final boss, which ends up being a repeat of a boss fight you had roughly 2 hours ago. After defeating the mutated Doctor, you return to your friends whom you're helping escape from LA. You decide to use the zombie cure on Sam B from the first game instead of yourself, then they fly off into the sunset whilst you remain behind. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman from earlier in the game watches you from a nearby rooftop. Some funky music starts playing as your character pummels a few zombies. One of their heads flies up and lands next to a Hollywood Star of Fame with the Dead Island 2 logo on it. And the end. That's right, if you want some closure, then you're gonna have to buy the season pass and wait for the DLC. You would expect after nearly 10 years of total development time that somebody would have thought to actually conclude the story within the game itself, especially considering the game retails for £55 or 60 USD for the base game and a whopping £75 or 90 USD for the edition that includes the season pass, which you're gonna need to get the complete story. In conclusion, Dead Island 2's gameplay shines hard enough to make up for some of its shortcomings, such as the odd decision to cut the number of co-op players from 4 down to 3, as well as some of the cliched mini-boss designs, but the glaring issues with the rushed and clearly unfinished storyline make it incredibly difficult to recommend at full price. In all honesty, I would hold off on purchasing the game right now solely due to the predatory nature of the DLC/expansion pass. Vote with your wallet and show publishers that expansion passes should complement and build upon a finished game, not be used as a tool to bait more money out of people to get a complete experience. Or, if you have no morals, then fuck it, buy it, I'm not the boss of you. It's a real shame that such a good game is completely betrayed by modern business practices. Let me know if I've been too harsh on the game, and whether or not it actually is worth paying full price for, despite the wonky story. I'd like to give a big shout out to Deep Silver for providing access to their game, and I'd like to remind everyone to follow me on Twitter and subscribe here on YouTube as I host regular game giveaways to celebrate subscriber milestones. As always, thanks for listening to me ramble on about video games. See you next time.